So this past Thursday, the heat stopped working at my girlfriend's house. I'm thinking it's the thermostat. I go buy a new thermostat, wire it up, and the furnace still acts up again. So this is like an actual emergency because here is the environment in which I live. Okay, so I go and check the igniter inside the furnace. That's good. And then I find that the flame sensor is cooked. So I go out, buy another flame sensor, replace it. And as I'm working on that, I decide to take a break and go on Facebook and then look at the Justice for Jenn Soto Facebook page. And on that page, I see a post by Hughes. And I read that post and I go back to the furnace. I fix the furnace. The temperature is going back up to a respectable level. And I go back and read it again. And this is what he said. My opinion that Jennifer was also groomed was one I came up with based on actually looking up how these predators work. Also, didn't you guys hear the investigators say that even after they looked into Jennifer for being involved, they now believe she was not aware of what Stephan Sterns was doing? So, do you all also agree with the actual investigators who actively tried to find a connection but couldn't, but now believe she was not aware? Wake up. You know what, though? I bet most of you never heard the investigators say that because the channels you watch and the people you follow would never play that for you. It's more entertaining to have another boogeyman to go after. I went over to his YouTube channel to find which video he's referencing.
Today's video is going to sort of piggyback on top of last night's show where we discussed the things that predators do, and it was serving as a warning to parents out there to look for these particular things that predators like Stephan Sterns do to be able to abuse the victims that they choose. And I think it's pretty obvious when you go over those documents. We went over 7 different, well, they weren't really documents, they were 7 different articles, and they all had similar things to say. And they talk about how the predators will groom the parents and the child at the same time. And I think that's exactly what happened with Jennifer.
First, let's make sure we're on the same page about what he means when he says the word grooming. And this is YouTube, so I can't say certain words. You know how it goes. Grooming is the action or behavior used to establish an emotional connection with a vulnerable person, generally a minor under the age of consent, and sometimes the victim's family, to lower their inhibitions with the objective of SA. It can occur in various settings, including online, in person, and through other means of communication. Children who are groomed may experience mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, and self-deletion ideation. There's a footnote link after the first sentence, and it says, a significant aspect of the grooming process is that the abuser also grooms the child's parents. The abuser dupes the parents into believing that he or she is a trusted adult into whose care they can entrust their child. There's a footnote link after the first sentence, and it says, a significant aspect of the grooming process is that the abuser also grooms the child's parents. The abuser dupes the parents into believing that he or she is a trusted adult into whose care they can entrust their child. This is the part where Hughes makes his point by playing a portion of the interview that Jenn Soto had with detectives on March 1st. And then he'll play that section and then he'll make his point.
Now let's start off by listening to a portion of Jennifer's interview that I had lip synced and enhanced a while ago. We'll just listen to that right now.
Oh, okay. So I had a rule. She wasn't allowed to sleep in his bedroom at all. Like, no sleepovers, no nothing. For a very long time. For years.
Since we're pausing,
yeah.
What brought that up? Was that like a request of his? Like, can we sleep in the same bed? Request of hers? Or you just saying,
me being super paranoid, not to trust anyone. For the longest life, even though he treated her well, I still looked at him on, like side eye, like making sure, like, is that normal? Is this okay? That was normal. Okay.
Yeah, and as we learned last night, that's totally normal. That over time, the predators will push the boundaries, even though at the beginning you were a little bit paranoid about it or questioning whether it was okay. Over time, they develop trust and again push the boundaries even further, and then they'll be accepted to be able to do things like a slumber party, etc.
Accepted to be able to do things like a slumber party? Jenn Soto wasn't groomed by Stephan Sterns. Hughes isn't just wrong about that. There are levels to his wrongness. So let's start with Jenn Soto.
Oh, okay. So I had a rule. She wasn't allowed to sleep in his bedroom at all. Like, no sleepovers, no nothing. For a very long time. For years.
When you're a kid and your parents told you that you weren't allowed to do something, that was usually after you had already did something or attempted to do the thing that they now don't want you to do. So what I'm saying is that Jenn didn't have this rule from day one. There had to be something that caused her to make up that rule. So before that rule existed, it would have to be more of a common sense boundary. So if we were to reword what Jenn's saying and make it more of a common sense boundary, it would be she wasn't supposed to sleep in Stephan's bedroom. So we already have the common sense boundary. Madeline wasn't supposed to sleep in Stephan's bedroom, which an event takes place for Jenn to make up that rule and say Madeline wasn't allowed to sleep in Stephan's bedroom. Now, let's actually finish Jenn's own sentence. She wasn't allowed to sleep in Stephan's bedroom at all. That's added emphasis there. So by Jenn saying Madeline wasn't allowed to sleep in Stephan's bedroom at all, is like saying she wasn't allowed to sleep in Stephan's bedroom for any reason. And it shows a higher level of restriction. And a higher level of restriction in this context is only necessitated by a higher level of intent. And that intent is placed on Madeline, which is very problematic because when she was asked this question, it was March 1st, before she knew that they were going to find Madeline's body, and 2 days after she was told all about the CSAM stuff. And she puts the intent on Madeline sleeping in Stephan's room on Madeline, as if Madeline took the initiative to do all of that shit. I don't know if Jenn's telling the truth about making up a rule stating that Madeline wasn't allowed to sleep in Stephan's bedroom, but if I wanted to know if it were true or not, I would probably ask what brought about that rule, right? Now let's see what the detective asks her.
I wanted to make sure that nothing was happening and that I was missing something, but I'm sorry. Repeat the question then.
So I guess you said like you had a rule. Like obviously we know now they've slept in the same bedroom together and everything else. I'm sure you're questioning a lot of things that like you haven't been told or that are going on. The thought process of them sleeping in the same bedroom caused you to say that you had a rule for the longest time where they couldn't.
Yeah.
So when you say you had a rule, I guess I'm asking what prompted the rule. I'm asking what prompted.
Sleepovers before. Yeah. Like, you want to watch movies and eat snacks? Can we do that? I'm like, no. We can all watch movies down here together.
She doesn't even answer the question. But let's see what Hughes has to say about that.
See that right there? Hey, can we watch movies and have snacks together upstairs together? See, pushing the boundaries, and eventually, after a while, when everything, it seems like he's a trustworthy person, she may have caved in at a certain point, and then it became something she allowed because Madeline never said anything about it because Stephan Sterns groomed her not to say anything. They use guilt against the child for them not to say anything.
Jenn Soto's going to continue her rant, and Hughes is going to comment on that part of her rant, and I'll give you my opinion from that point.
We can all sleep down here together. Up until June, together all the time. So we were always. She would sleep in the middle. I would sleep on this side. He would sleep on the other side. It wasn't until June that he got his own bedroom and I sent him upstairs. That's where the requests for sleepover started.
If you agree with what Hughes is saying about Jenn Soto being groomed by Stephan Sterns, and the example that he's using as far as when Stephan moved upstairs to bedroom number 4, that was in June of 2023. The bulk of the CCM evidence is dated between 2019 and 2022. My haircut's fire.
And I kept telling her, no. I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, and see, it turns out that Madeline is the one asking for the sleepovers, and that was probably done by Stephan Sterns having her ask for it, because if he asked for it, it'd be weirder, right? Like even weirder. So she's the one that's asking for it. So it seems like, well, she's asking for it. Nothing bad must be happening. And that's the tactic that Stephan Sterns is using to use Madeline to ask to do the sleepovers.
A sleepover is a social occasion in which a young person stays at the home of a friend. Multiple people and or friends may sleep over at the friend's home. What about the stuff going on in bedroom number 4? Would anybody define that as a sleepover? No. Jenn Soto has redefined the word sleepover as a way of minimizing what was going on in bedroom number 4. And the thing is, if Hughes is only looking at the general signs of a predator, he's not looking how that predator would operate in this specific dynamic with Jennifer and Madeline. He could have done one thing. What are the signs? What are the behavior patterns? What are the things that a complicit or enabling parent would say in this situation? They would say everything that Jenn is saying in this interview.
So she's the one that's asking for it. So it seems like, well, she's asking for it. Nothing bad must be happening. And that.
In order to minimize and distance herself from what was going on in bedroom number 4, Jenn Soto has redefined the word sleepover. But if you just put Jenn's words in motion, you can see where the issues are. And this is Jenn's sleepover logic.
I had a rule. She wasn't allowed to sleep in his bedroom at all. Like,
No sleepovers.
In one of Jenn's earlier interviews, she was asked if Madeline was allowed to attend sleepovers at her friend's house. Jenn said no, because as Jenn put it, I don't know the dad, I don't know the brother, and I'm afraid that Madeline could get assaulted. The detective acknowledged that reasonable fear and asked her if she ever hosted a sleepover. Jenn said no. So one can only use logic here. The reason that Madeline's not allowed to attend sleepovers is the same reason why Jenn never hosted one. Because the male in the house could assault. Jenn talks about the sleepovers in bedroom number 4 because they're all sleepovers, according to her. And remember, she said, no, 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 no. Now we know the reason she said no. Because the male in the house would assault. Yeah. So if she knows why Madeline can't attend sleepovers, she knows why she's not hosting sleepovers, and she knows why she said no to the bedroom number 4 stuff, she was aware.
I've always told him that my biggest fear is that this would turn into a Woody Allen situation where the stepdaughter or the dad grooms the child and the child then turns 18 and ends up running away with him. I told him like that was my biggest fear and I don't ever want that happening. Like, you can't do that to me. Like,
why would you say that to him?
Because I never trusted. I grew up being told never trust a man.
When I heard Jenn Soto say that, I had a very incorrect understanding of what the Woody Allen thing was about. I thought that Woody Allen was a really old Hollywood guy and he was dating a woman who was in Hollywood but kind of closer to his age. And then he left her and later on got with and married her daughter. And I'm thinking that she's like 30 or something like that, like well above, well into adulthood. Okay. So when I heard Jenn Soto say that and then explain the reference and talk about from the daughter and all that shit, I was like, and I went on Wikipedia and I was, oh, this is what. So at that point, I thought to myself, how would I react if I was dating a woman who had a daughter and said that to me? So I took what she said and made it into a sentence that I would hear from her, right? So, like, my biggest fear that this will be a Woody Allen situation. I thought about it, and then I remembered I had to go on Wikipedia for it. So if a woman were to have said that to me, and I go on my phone and I look up Wikipedia, and I see that, I would just get up and leave. As soon as I go on Wikipedia and then press the personal part and scroll down, because Woody Allen's mad old, so he's got probably paragraphs, and then I would just get up and leave. I don't care where I was, where we were. I don't care if I was in another country or nah. It's you don't exist. That is like that is crazy. And if I understood the Woody Allen reference as I do now, and she were to have said that, it would be the same thing. Okay, it would just be delayed with the Wikipedia, So I thought, how would I react after reading Wikipedia versus not having to look up Wikipedia? And the thing is, it wouldn't be a versus. In this case, as Jenn explains it, she would have said that multiple times because she said that. Hold on.
His fear is that this would turn into.
Come on now.
I've always told him that my biggest fear is that this would turn into a Woody Allen situation.
I've always told him. That means you told this man multiple times. So the Wikipedia versus a real understanding of the situation, it wouldn't be a versus. It would, from her standpoint, it's She says it more than once. So now the next question is, how the hell did this man answer that? How can you respond to that? There's no response for that. If she actually said that to him, what the fuck did he say in response to that shit? I need to know that. That's the question that the detective should have asked her. Well, what did he say in response to that? Well, you know what? It doesn't matter what he said. If she actually said that repeatedly and he took that on the chin, then that's your answer. That is your answer. That is like, oh man, oh no, 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 no. Was he like, I want, not, I don't want to be a Woody Allen situation. I mean, come on. That is crazy. And I don't know how anybody who is invested in this case, could hear that and say, she's blindsided by all this. She gave it up right there. Because whether or not that actually happened, which she says it happened more than once because she always told him the biggest fear is Woody Allen. That means, at the very least, her intuition is telling her this dude is a whole problem. And then on top of that, let me go back.
Then turns 18 and ends up running away with him. I told him, like, that was my biggest fear, and I don't ever want that happening. Like, you can't do that to me. Like, and I don't ever want that happening. Like, you can't do that to me. Like,
you can't do that to me. What about he can't do that to your daughter? Clearly, he's not doing shit to you. That is crazy. How do I say this? She only cares how his behavior or his actions affect her. She doesn't even consider her own the effect it will have on her own daughter in this. Whether or not what she's saying is true. If it's a lie, then in her own imagination, she does not give a fuck about the well-being of her daughter. When I first saw Gray Hughes' video saying Jenn Soto was groomed, I didn't want to be the guy that's like, this is why I think he's wrong. Because it makes it seem like I have all the answers. And I don't. And I've had ideas about what transpired with this case, and I was wrong. But there's nothing, if you're wrong about something, it's okay. But if your need to be right is supersedes any kind of disagreement, that's different. And that's what I sense from him. That it's not really about the overall events of the case. Even if he's interviewing people, getting FOIA requests and all that, it's like no matter what he does that seems like he's being thorough with this. And some of those interviews, like with the old friends of Stephan Sterns, those are good interviews. But there's a point where he will focus on something that's like this, like Jenn Soto being groomed. Like, come on. Like, how do you see that? And I'm not going to say why I think he's wrong without first trying to say, what makes Gray Hughes' theory on this seem accurate? Over the course of Gray Hughes' video, where he talks about this Jenn Soto grooming theory, he has a screen up and there's a website, and that website talks about CSA. That website is owned by a law firm who specializes in trying civil cases on behalf of victims of CSA. In the beginning of Gray Hughes' video, he has Jenn Soto's interrogation with police from March 1st. You've heard it, the one where she talks about sleepovers and where Gray Hughes comments and talks about slumber parties. I'm going to play that clip for you. I'm going to take out the part where the detective speaks. So it's just Jenn Soto and then Gray Hughes' commentary.
Oh, okay. So I had a rule. She wasn't allowed to sleep in his bedroom at all. Like, no sleepovers, no nothing. For a very long time. For years. Me being super paranoid, not to trust anyone. For the longest life, even though he treated her well, I still looked at him on, like side eye, like making sure, like, is that normal? Is this okay? That looks normal. Okay.
Yeah, and as we learned last night, that's totally normal. That over time, the predators will push the boundaries, even though at the beginning you were a little bit paranoid about it or questioning whether it was okay. Over time, they develop trust and again push the boundaries even further, and then they'll be accepted to be able to do things like a slumber party, etc.
Still looked at him on, like side eye, like making sure, like, is that normal? Is this okay? That's not
Questioning whether it was okay.
not to trust anyone.
They develop trust.
Sleepovers, no not.
Slumber party.
Each of the words that she uses, if it's not the exact thing, it's close to it. Now, if you take each of those words and you put them together, normal, over time, boundaries, paranoid, questioning, develop trust, slumber party, you put all those words in order from paranoia, complete mistrust to complete trust. Over time, that's grooming. So he used words that she used in a deflection, put them together, and the trajectory of mistrust to complete trust, he used that as to make the definition of grooming. He didn't look at the source of information and point to something and say, that's grooming. Matter of fact, the event that he's pointing to, as far as Madeline sleeping in Stephan's bedroom, is a year after the bulk of the CSAM evidence was produced. So how is he grooming in 2023 and he's already gone 100 miles an hour doing whatever in between 2019 and 2022? I already told you it's chronologically impossible. And grooming's not a standalone event. It takes place over a long course of time. They're talking about June 2023. She met that man in 2017. I don't know what you call that, where you take words of someone's, she's not even telling a narrative, and then you make it a narrative under the terminology that you want, but you don't use the source of information to identify the example. Wouldn't you use the source of information and say, that sounds like it's, he doesn't even do that. He picks and chooses certain words that match up with the definition of grooming and puts them together so it sounds like the trajectory of mistrust to complete trust, and he calls that grooming. So what makes Gray Hughes' theory seem accurate? I got a comment earlier that said, I don't like Jenn for what happened. But if you think about it, they didn't charge her for a reason. So at the end of the day, it does make a lot of sense what he said. It makes a lot of sense if he's not giving you the full picture. If Jenn wasn't charged for a reason, if they didn't charge Jenn for a reason, what's the reason? Gray Hughes saying Jenn Soto's innocent based on not being arrested. They didn't arrest Jenn, so she's innocent. That would be like flipping a coin, heads meaning guilty, tails meaning innocent. Gray Hughes just says innocent and walks away before the coin hits the ground. So Jenn not being arrested at this point does not mean she's innocent. You don't need a law degree to know that. Anybody, they'll tell you. Jenn Soto hasn't been arrested yet. Is based on the course of the two cases that Stephan's fighting right now. So he has the CSAM-S battery case, and he then has the unaliving case. So some people will call this a double whammy, where you get charged with a crime and then you get charged with a second case while the first case is still pending. Basically, what that does is it makes sure that, especially if you don't have a criminal history, that first case will make you have a criminal history. You have a prior felony conviction. So when you get to the second case, the punishment is much harsher. So even though the first case is a death penalty case, the second case can really seal it for him. If Stephan could get 30 years on the first case, and then when he goes up for the second case, he's done. And based on what I'm saying, if Jenn were to be arrested, most likely she would be arrested after Stephan's first case. So, but once she's not being charged now, but after the CSAM-S battery case goes through and Stephan's guilty, they'll probably arrest Jenn for the unaliving. And they'll probably try them separately. I think Stephan knows more than I think he does. Jenn knows more. And it's unfortunate that Gray Hughes will have you thinking that Jenn is innocent because he's not giving you the whole scoop. It is just the actions of the police in this case will tell you that they don't believe Jenn. If they're in the beginning of this case, they put GPS trackers on their cars, they searched their house, they did a lot of things that police might do certain things as far as searching and bringing canines to the house to try to find a scent, things like that. But they were definitely on Jenn's tail by putting a GPS tracker on her car and Stephan's car. So even after Madeline's body was found, they have a warrant for Jenn's phone. That's if someone has probable cause to get a warrant, they know enough to put into an affidavit to get access to your phone. So what do you think they have once they have access to your phone? They got everything. So if you put just the fact that they're filing for search warrants should tell you that they're on her. And then in addition to that, the derivative use immunity, just having that means that if no prosecutor is going into a case without the confidence of winning, they're not charging you with something without the confidence of winning. And they're not going to give up a conviction for immunity unless they really know that you're going to flop this one. And derivative use immunity basically means, this is from the police or the DA perspective, you've been lying this whole time, and we know it. So we're going to let you save your own butt by letting you come in here and telling us the whole truth. And nothing that you tell us about what happened will be used against you. And if you don't lie, you'll have immunity. But if you lie, deal's off the table. Just them giving Jenn the opportunity to have a derivative use immunity interview pretty much means they knew she was lying and knew that she would stick to that lie even after the fact. So if you put that together, she's lying to save herself. She's not lying to help Stephan. So Jenn, with the whole texting Stephan's father to get him a lawyer, no, it's to save herself because she doesn't want Stephan to go in there and say something that will be damaging to her. So she's going to do everything to prevent being arrested. So what else makes Gray Hughes' theory seem accurate? Is it because he's knowledgeable? Hughes sounds knowledgeable, and I sounded knowledgeable in the beginning of this video when I told you about the furnace. I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. No matter what I was saying, I told you what the problem was, and I showed you that I found the solution. So I guess I do know what I'm talking about. But the furnace was a static problem, meaning the problem doesn't change. I had to learn the dynamics of the HVAC system. I had to find the cause of the problem. When I found the cause of the problem, I replaced the parts, and I know that it's fixed when there's heat in the house. And after that, I get a pretty cool YouTube anecdote. So I replaced the thermostat, I replaced the flame sensor, and it's no longer Siberia. You can't do that with what's going on in the Madeline Soto case. There is no static problem. It's a dynamic problem, meaning it's constant change. Hughes presents his theory as far as Jenn Soto being groomed as a static problem. Grooming is, and everything involved in this case, is a dynamic problem. It constantly changes over time. So he acts like he has the solution or he has the problem solved by just pointing to a couple things, but it doesn't work that way. Now, listen to this.
It's clandestine and the parent doesn't see it, the child might not be aware of that. Now, isolation, these predators will often make up excuses to spend long periods of time alone with the child.
Now, I showed you earlier how Hughes was taking the word and then wording them in a way to tell you that's the definition of grooming. Now, Hughes in his video has his screen up, and on his screen is a website that talks about CSA. And that website is run by a law firm that tries civil cases on behalf of victims of CSA. So the information on this topic is thorough, and he's using that as a way to seem like an expert in this topic. When in his own Facebook post that I pointed out to you, let me go back and read that. My opinion that Jennifer was also groomed was one I came up with based on actually looking up how these predators work. So he just now started learning about this to prove his theory, and he tries to act like an expert in it. But that's the difference between a static problem and a dynamic problem. Going back to the furnace, if I only looked at the thermostat, I wouldn't have fixed the problem. I have to look at the whole dynamic to find the problem. Hughes is looking at one part of a dynamic problem. That's Stephan Sterns. He's not even looking at Jenn as part of the problem, or he doesn't even consider it. This man has Google and is looking up just how the predator works, but he doesn't look at what the signs of a complicit and enabling parent are. At the very minimum, there are 3 people you have to look for signs of CSA: Stephan, Jennifer, and Madeline. There are signs of that. And you know what? They're on the website that he's using to look like an expert. So you would think that he would look at the credible source of information that he's looking right at on his computer screen and say, this is a sign of this problem. But he doesn't do that. He uses Jenn Soto to remix her words and then say, but this is on the site. That's not how it's done. It's not how it just doesn't work that way. So he has 3 steps. He takes Jenn Soto at her word during an interrogation at that. He matches what she's saying to predator traits and then tells you, oh, you see that there? See, that's what it is. He's just reading, if he is going on that website, he's just reading the vocabulary terms. He's reading, he could have read the different terms on that website and say, you know what, that's what that is. He doesn't do that.
It's clandestine and the parent doesn't see it, the child might not be aware of that. Now, isolation, these predators will often make up excuses to spend long periods of time alone with the child.
He goes as far as to read that, but he doesn't read that and then say, you know what, an example of that is right here. An example of isolation is when Jenn Soto moved Madeline from Kissimmee, Florida to Port Charlotte 3 hours away from her family, her friends, her school, in the middle of the school year, during the pandemic. That's isolation. At the time, she was 9. She probably didn't have her own cell phone, and she was stuck in that apartment with them. Who knows what was going on over there? Who could she call then? That's isolation. And that's why you look at Jenn in the whole dynamic, because she's the one providing the environment. Stephan wasn't doing all that stuff like he was when Juan was living there. He couldn't do all that stuff when Jenn was living with Yolanda. When Juan moved out and he was in his van doing his thing, that's when Stephan moved in. That's facts. That's just facts. Think of it like this. If you're invested in this case and you really know every interview, you've heard everything. When you hear Jenn speak, see if her statements don't boil down to these simple things. I didn't know. I didn't see it. I wasn't there. Do you ever hear her say anything to the effect of, when did this happen? Where was I when this happened? How did I not know? How did this get by me? No, she doesn't ask any questions. She doesn't volunteer any information. You have to pull it, sounded wild, pry it from her, I guess. Everything that Jenn says, when it comes down to if she's getting pressed on anything, I didn't know, I didn't see it, I wasn't there. When coming up with a theory like the one he has about Jenn Soto being groomed, hopefully I explain why it doesn't make sense. But it's just, it's wild to me how he doesn't see like the human aspect of this. How he can say words like boundaries and things like that and try to twist people's words to his advantage and doesn't look at how this 12-year-old girl had to live every day with those two people. How she had to wake up between those two people every day. And then he has the nerve to bring up someone pushing boundaries. There were no boundaries. What kind of boundaries you have? What kind of boundaries you see when you have to sleep in between two 30-something-year-old people? What kind of boundaries do you see to where you take a shower, you got to walk past them? You got to walk out their room into the kitchen area, right next to the front door, to walk into your little partition to just get dressed. Come on. And then go out of that little partition area back into their room to sleep in between them.
But eventually, at some point, like we really want to watch. I forgot what movie it was. They really wanted to watch something, and I was really tired. And I said, "Okay, fine, go ahead, but this can't happen often." I got home.
Yeah, so he relented at one point, and then after that seemed to go well, it seemed to be normal to them now. It became normal, and even though it wasn't often, she would allow it so that she could take care of her own self. She has mental issues, and a lot of times when people have mental issues, especially as many as she has, you're spending a lot of your time trying to manage how you're feeling.
That doesn't even make sense. How could she relent on something like that when she's the one that's been doing all the weird sleeping arrangements? Mental issues, look, you go to a therapist, you take the prescriptions you're given for your mental health issues, whatever they are, and that's so you don't have to think about your mental state all the time. But Jenn uses it as a way to absolve herself from accountability, because Jenn is more sophisticated than what she puts out. So you don't accuse her of certain things, or you don't think she's sophisticated enough to manipulate people. So she adds on the mental health problems. So mental health becomes, I'm not aware, and prescriptions become, I'm numb. You see what I mean? It kind of gets her out of that. Like, if he didn't say all that, most people will probably be pressing her harder. But, oh, she has mental health, she has bipolar.
Around 10:30, I started getting ready for bed myself. I started eating and taking my meds because I have to take meds. When I went to take my meds, I realized, oh my God, I forgot to take my Saturday night's meds, which is why I felt so weird and so abnormal and not myself Sunday while I was at work. Everyone at work noticed I was acting different and not being myself. Like I couldn't smile in front of the guests. I felt this wave of depression that I hadn't felt in years. It was my bipolar symptoms coming up again, but I've been medicating myself for all this time. I realized I forgot to take my meds, and I said, "You guys, I need a good night's sleep. I need to take my meds." Um, I sent them to sleep upstairs in the guest bedroom so that I could get a good night's sleep.
How many first person pronouns can one person make in 1 minute? All she talks about is herself. So think about this. Like, her daughter is actually missing. Well, to everybody, I don't know about to her. She might know she knows what's going on. Her daughter's missing, and all she talks about is herself. Jen only cares about Jen. You heard that. Have you heard Jen talk about anything positive in a subjective way about her daughter? Have you heard Jen say anything that would tell us how her daughter is unique? This picture is the one that really set it off for me. The paintings just stacked up against the wall. The whole house has no art on it. Madeline's little partition has all these art supplies and not one piece of art on the wall. That tells you exactly what's going on. Jenn Soto said she didn't take her medication on Saturday. She was feeling bipolar symptoms and depression or whatever that she never felt before. Now, Jenn Soto had a blood work appointment on Monday. I don't think Jen forgot to take her meds. I think Jen remembered to take the medication she's supposed to take and couldn't take the medication that she wanted to take because she had to get her blood drawn on Monday. And if you didn't take the drugs you wanted to take on Saturday because you had a blood work appointment on Monday, what could be absent from your system in 48 hours? Then I have a painting, the one you see in the center there, that is inspired by people like Jenn Soto. Maybe you can figure out what it means. Be safe.
But I could get a good night's sleep.